I turn with that long preface to Imran Khan because I think you depressed everybody in this room by saying that Tahir here would be in fear of his life if he were in Pakistan because the judges wouldn't incriminate the person who killed your governor, and that there was really no hope, and that the drone attacks had to end. Now let's presume that there's no military operation in Pakistan. How do you open up and recapture that space still? And how do you speak to the Pakistani population in a way that inspires them to think another way?
Well, you know, it's not, I didn't want to depress everyone. It's not as bad as it looks. It's much worse. Look, as long as there is occupation of Afghanistan and the US keeps pushing Pakistan to do more in the tribal areas, you are actually helping Al-Qaeda. Terrorism, international terrorism will grow because this will become the cause for Al-Qaeda to rally. If we wanted to end this thing, I would try and isolate Al-Qaeda because Al-Qaeda is the threat to Western civilization. So rather than isolating it, the last thing I would do is that there are about 1 million armed men in Pakistan's tribal areas. Every man knows how to use a gun from the age of 10 onwards. Every man is armed. Now, is this a sensible policy of pushing these 1 million men towards Al-Qaeda rather than isolating Al-Qaeda, which according to Pentagon, there are only 200 or 300 Al-Qaeda left in that part of the world. So I think this is one of the most brainless wars ever being fought. I do not see, it's immoral, I think it's insane. Bombing, I mean, how do you fight terrorism by bombing villages? I mean, how do you think that this is not going to happen, that these people are not going to get more radicalized? And so and this is exactly what Al-Qaeda wants. It wants, the world to think that this is a war against Islam. It will have a never-ending number of recruits. These will become holy warriors. Exactly what Mr. Tahir al-Qadri is saying. You want to de-link Islam. And so surely what is happening in Afghanistan and Pakistan actually is now become a war of resistance against the Pakistan army in the tribal areas, against the US army in the Pashtun, in NATO in the Pashtun areas, is now a war of liberation. And I'm afraid we will be sitting here 3 years from now and this will still keep going on, and the West will not be any safer. So there needs to be a change of strategy.
The question is how you make Pakistan safer for Pakistanis.
Look, I myself am not safe. How can I make Pakistan safe? The situation in Pakistan right now is that you have to tread such a thin line now. You have to be so careful. Anything could be misinterpreted as you're a collaborator with the enemy now. And so therefore, Mr. Tahir al-Qadri is not living in Pakistan. There's another scholar, Javed Ghamdi, who spoke out against it. He's living in Malaysia today. As Islamic imams have been shot in mosques, there are suicide attacks, more attacks in mosques going on against any scholar who dares say anything about Islam being against suicide bombing. So, I mean, how am I going to now stand up and say that, look, it's very naughty, wrong, don't do these things, unless the root cause is tackled, and that is, I'm afraid, what is going on in Afghanistan and Pakistan's tribal areas.
Well, we'll no doubt return to this, but we've only got 15 minutes, so it's really time to open it up to everybody here. We'll bring in your views on social cohesion, I'm sure, because it'll be brought up. So why don't, if you want to ask a question or make a comment that would inspire a response, please raise your hand, and I'll recognize you. And if no one does, we can keep on asking questions of ourselves for the next 10 minutes very easily. Audrey Cronin wants to ask a question.
No,
you go ahead.
I think as the token American on the panel, I probably should say something, which is that I agree with you that there should be much more disaggregation of the threat, and that the original action in Afghanistan should have been more focused specifically on Al-Qaeda, but the situation in Afghanistan did not begin the day that the United States, through its various proxies, entered Afghanistan in 2001, late 2001. I mean, it was a situation that was the source of the attack that arrived on the United States territory, obviously. I'm not saying anything that you don't know, but it isn't that the United States invented the threat that was there. Now, whether the military action subsequent to that has worsened that threat, there I think there are some things that you've said that I would agree with. My only plea to you is, how can we move forward? It's not as if we can simply leave the country instantaneously. I mean, the occupation or the action or the military presence in Afghanistan is also accompanied by a tremendous amount of development assistance and work to try to build a state. However, in my personal opinion from the outset, however misguided and naive that may have been. It's not only a military occupation, although I understand that there are many elements, particularly of the Taliban, that are responding in the way that Afghanis respond. And then the last thing I would say is that some of the threat has come from across the border. I think we need to recognize that we didn't invent the fact that there are some operatives that have had sanctuary and have been in Pakistan. And now I think that it has been a mistake to generalize about the nature of those operatives and to call Al-Qaeda all of these various different elements, the Haqqani network, all of the various parts of the Taliban and so on. We're on the same page on that. But we need to be careful where exactly we start writing history.
Well, Al-Qaeda was trained by CIA.
I think the ISI had a bit to do with it as well.
Well, and ISI was funded by the CIA, so they arrived, Al-Qaeda was, Osama bin Laden arrived in Pakistan on a CIA plane. A friend of mine had drinks with Osama bin Laden in 1989 in the American Embassy. So, let's get this thing right now. Pakistan did not invent these groups. Pakistan was a frontline state where there were 4 million refugees from Afghanistan. Pakistan, the militant groups today, which you're talking about, and with the Honorable Minister is talking about, which are a source of worry to India, were created then, during the Afghan Jihad. Then, of course, the same people who were fighting Jihad were heroes, and Ronald Reagan called them, reminding they reminded him of the founding fathers of the US. I mean, the same Hikmat Yar, who's considered now a terrorist, was a hero. I mean, I attended a ball for the Mujahideen in London in the 80s. So let's get that right first. These people were created at that point, and then suddenly, now that these people have turned against the same Pakistan army, which ISI, which built them, is now hunting them down, and they are killing the Pakistan army. And this idea that people going from North Waziristan into Afghanistan, if that did not happen, somehow the US would win the war. I'm afraid if you look back at the history of Afghanistan, starting from the British, you go back to the Russians. I mean, the Russians killed 1 million Afghans. They still lost the war.